Okay, so we saw you've been checking out fasting and all the health benefits, and you were really zeroing in on anything about eye health, especially AMD.
Age-related macular degeneration.
Right, yeah, exactly, AMD.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're going to deep dive into today. What do the sources say about fasting and keeping your eyes healthy?
Yeah, and we've got some really interesting stuff here, from specific research findings to bigger picture perspectives on how fasting affects your body and how that all kind of plays into eye health.
And how it all connects.
It's fascinating.
So one thing that really jumped out at me was this study that said that there might be a link between intermittent fasting, specifically like skipping breakfast, and
Wow.
maybe having a lower risk of developing AMD.
It's really interesting, and it's not just that basic finding. It's also that they found that link was even stronger for certain groups of people.
Yeah, who were they?
So they were looking at people under 70 who were obese and who lived in urban areas. So you start to think, is there something about their diets or their metabolisms or even just where they live that makes this link between fasting and AMD risk even more noticeable?
Right, yeah, think about all the factors.
Exactly.
But it's really important to remember that this is just a study showing a connection, right? It's not saying that if you skip breakfast, you're guaranteed to avoid AMD.
It's correlation, not causation.
Yeah.
It's a really important distinction, and it's valuable because it gives us clues about where to look deeper. It's a starting point.
Yeah, it points us in a direction.
Right.
Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit from this specific study. What are some of the ways that fasting could benefit our eyes in general, which might then have some impact on something like AMD later down the road?
Okay, so when we look at eye health as a whole, there are a few key mechanisms that fasting seems to influence, and one of the biggest ones is this idea of reducing oxidative stress and inflammation.
Yeah.
Those are the big bad guys when it comes to AMD and a lot of other eye problems.
Right, we hear that all the time.
Exactly, and fasting seems to have these effects that work against oxidation, and it may help lower those inflammatory markers in your body. So it's giving your eyes some extra protection.
Oh, it's interesting. So, we hear all the time about antioxidants in our diet and how important they are.
Yeah.
So is it kind of like fasting puts your body in a more antioxidant protective mode?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. The changes that happen in your metabolism when you're fasting, they can actually affect how your cells work, and that can lead to less of those damaging free radicals and inflammatory compounds being produced. So it's creating a better environment for your eye cells to thrive.
I like that, to thrive.
Yeah.
Okay, so our sources also talked about this thing called autophagy, which sounds kind of complicated. What is that in simple terms, and how does it relate to our eyes?
Autophagy, it's basically like your body's spring cleaning system, but at a cellular level when you fast, this process gets ramped up. So it's like the cells are getting rid of anything that's broken or not working properly. And for your eyes, what that means is it could be clearing out damaged proteins and other junk that can build up and contribute to those age-related eye issues like we were talking about with AMD. And by getting rid of all that buildup, the cells in your eyes can function better for longer.
So it's like a deep cleanse.
Exactly, a deep cleanse for your cells, and fasting can be like the on switch.
Okay, I like that.
And that renewal process could be super important for tissues that have a long lifespan, like those cells in your retina at the back of your eye.
Right.
They need all the help they can get.
Now, one of the sources also mentioned improved insulin sensitivity as a possible benefit of fasting. And I know we often hear about that in relation to diabetes. How does that tie into general eye health and maybe even indirectly with AMD?
Yeah, you're right on the money with the one, improved insulin sensitivity has a direct impact on how your body handles blood sugar, which is crucial for preventing diabetic eye conditions like retinopathy. But even if you don't have diabetes, having better insulin sensitivity just means your overall metabolic health is in a better place, and that can definitely support healthy eyes.
Even indirectly.
Exactly. It's like when your metabolism is running smoothly, it's less stressful for all your tissues, and that includes your eyes.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So some potentially good things to consider there, but our sources also pointed out some important things to keep in mind, some nuances and possible downsides. Let's get into those.
Okay.
Nutrient deprivation was one that stood out. How does that work?
That's a really important point. It's like, how do you balance the good stuff about fasting with the fact that you need certain nutrients to keep your eyes healthy? Those vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, they're essential for good vision and helping to prevent age-related problems. And fasting means you're eating less overall, so that could temporarily limit how much of those nutrients you're getting.
So if someone's fasting, it sounds like what they eat when they are eating is super important.
It's crucial. You've got to make sure you're getting a really nutrient-dense diet on those non-fasting days to make up for any shortfalls. And for AMD specifically, the sources really stress eating lots of leafy green vegetables. And those fatty fish packed with omega-3s try to get at least 2 servings of fish a week.
Right.
And it's also worth remembering that ARD's study, which showed that certain vitamins like C, E, and A, along with zinc, might actually help slow down AMD progression, so you've got to be sure you're getting those either through your diet or with supplements, especially if you're fasting regularly.
Especially if you're fasting.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. You can't just fast and expect good results. You've got to fuel your body properly when you are eating.
Exactly.
What about all the metabolic and hormonal changes that happen when you're fasting? The sources touched on that a bit.
Yeah, well, the fascinating thing is fasting isn't just about cutting calories. It triggers this whole chain reaction of metabolic adjustments in your body, like lowering blood glucose and improving insulin sensitivity, like we talked about earlier. And these changes, they can have wider effects, like potentially even impacting the health of those tiny blood vessels in your eyes. And then there are the hormones, things like growth hormone, which helps with cell repair and regeneration that could be beneficial for those retinal cells. And there's BDNF, which tends to increase during fasting, and it supports the neurons in your eyes. So that's another potential plus.
So it's more complex than just weight loss. There are these deeper changes going on that might be protective.
You got it. Those metabolic and hormonal shifts are thought to be some of the key reasons why fasting might have benefits that go beyond just eating less.
Interesting. So it sounds like the specific type of fasting you do is important too, right? There's intermittent fasting versus those longer, prolonged fasts.
Yeah, that's a big distinction. Intermittent fasting, with things like time-restricted eating or alternate day fasting, that's become pretty popular, and it's usually more doable for most people. And our sources suggest it could be good for your eyes without those extra risks you might get with prolonged fasting.
Right.
Extended fasting, though, that requires a lot more caution. Some people have said their vision got better during longer fasts, but some have experienced the opposite. It really depends on your individual health. How well you stay hydrated and what you're eating, all that becomes even more crucial with extended fasts.
So doing something like time-restricted eating might be a totally different experience for your eyes compared to jumping into a multi-day fast.
Exactly. The intensity and length of the fast can have different effects, and you really have to think about what's right for you and your health.
Yeah, know yourself.
Exactly.
And that brings us to this really crucial point. Everyone's different. It sounds like people might respond to fasting and how it affects their vision in their own unique way.
Yeah, that's a really key takeaway. Your genes, any existing eye conditions you might have, your overall health, and even how you fast, it all plays a role in how it affects your eyesight. What works for one person might not work or even be safe for someone else.
Yeah.
Individuality is huge.
Huge. So this all points to some practical advice and warnings that our sources emphasize. What are the must-dos and the things to definitely avoid if someone's thinking about using fasting to help their eye health?
Okay, the most important thing, talk to your doctor before you start any kind of fasting, especially if you already have any eye conditions or other health concerns. That's non-negotiable.
It's good advice in general.
Yeah, and for people with diabetes, this is even more important because fasting can really mess with your blood sugar levels, and it could be risky for their eye health if it's not carefully managed with their doctor's supervision.
So the message is don't just start fasting for your eyes based on something you read online.
Exactly. Talk to your doctor first.
Yeah.
And on top of that, regular checkups with your eye doctor are super important for keeping your eyes healthy, whether you're fasting or not, but they become even more important if you're fasting regularly. It's all about catching any changes early.
Right.
Exactly.
So what are some of the specific changes or symptoms in their eyes that people should watch out for if they are fasting?
Our sources mention a few common ones. Dry eyes, that can happen, and it might be because you're not drinking as much when you're fasting. You might feel some itching, burning redness or like a gritty feeling.
Yeah.
Using some lubricating eye drops and making sure you're staying hydrated can usually help with, some people say they get blurry vision, which can sometimes be because their blood sugar is fluctuating. If that keeps happening or gets worse, definitely talk to your doctor.
Right.
And then there's eye strain that can be a problem, especially if you're reading a lot or staring at screens while you're fasting. Taking breaks and having good lighting is key for managing that.
So listen to your body and pay attention to any changes in your vision. So bringing it back to AMD, what's the overall picture of the connection based on everything we've talked about?
Well, to sum it up, some early research does suggest that fasting, particularly intermittent fasting, might be linked to a lower risk of getting AMD. Plus, those general ways fasting might benefit your eyes, like reducing inflammation, keeping your blood vessels healthy, supporting that cellular repair we talked about, and fighting oxidative stress in your retina. All of that could theoretically be good news for AMD.
Right.
But we need more research to really nail down the exact relationship between different fasting methods and their impact on AMD specifically. These findings are exciting, but they're not the final word yet.
So it's an area that's still being studied, and while there's potential, it's not a proven treatment or a guaranteed way to prevent AMD.
Exactly. We need more studies to figure out which fasting methods might be best, what's happening in the eye specifically, and what the long-term effects on AMD risk and progression really are.
Okay, well, this has been a really interesting look at a really fascinating topic. It sounds like there's some exciting possibilities with fasting and eye health, especially for AMD, but with some really important things to consider.
You said it, you've got to be informed, live a healthy, well-rounded life, and always talk to your doctor before making any big changes, especially if you have any health conditions.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
All right, so let's recap the key takeaways for everyone listening. While some early research points to a possible link between intermittent fasting and a lower risk of AMD, and fasting might have some general benefits for eye health, we still need more research on the specifics of how different fasting methods affect AMD.
Yeah.
And as always, the most important advice is talk to your doctor or eye doctor before you start any kind of fasting routine, especially if you have any health issues.
That's perfect. And it makes you think about all this, given all those cellular cleanup processes, that fasting might trigger what other long-term effects could that have on our health beyond just our eyes.
Right beyond our eyes.
Yeah. What does this mean for research on aging and preventing different diseases? It's a really captivating area with so much more to discover.
Lots to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Always a pleasure.
Until next time.
See ya.